Hi everyone, welcome once again to Simple Things. Today we're going to be looking at just a simple illustration that clears up something that millions have stumbled over the years. How often have you heard people say things like, oh, the commandments are done away with, or Jesus came to fulfill the law, or we're no longer under the law but under grace, that sort of thing. Now today, we're going to make this bottle represents law. Now there are three sets of law in the Old Testament. First, there's a sacrificial law, which basically said that when Israel sinned, they had to bring an animal to the sanctuary to sacrifice. And when Jesus came, he was the fulfillment of that law. So that was done away with when Jesus came. Then there were the civil laws, which are referred to in the Bible as the law of Moses. That's basically like any typical law that you have in any nation today. And then there are the 10 Commandments laws in Exodus 20 and also in Deuteronomy 5. Now, let's make this one represents sin. Now, according to 1 John 3, verse 4, sin is the transgression of the law. So we're now going to make this one represent grace. Grace, as we know, is unmerited favor or pardon for sin, which is a transgression of the law. So now, let's make this one represent Savior. Now, the Savior is Jesus who came, as it's written in John 3:16, for God so loved the world, etc. So a Savior came to show us how to die, or to live, and to die for us so we could have grace, which is pardon for sin or unmerited favor. Pardon for sin, as I said, and sin is a transgression of the law. So, this one will represent the gospel. The gospel. And in Romans 1 verse 16 we read that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation, or in other words, good news about a Savior who came to die so that we can have grace, which is pardon for sin, and sin is a transgression of the law. So now we're going to make this one represent the church. And the church, according to 1 Timothy 3:15, is the pillar and ground of truth. And God rose up his church to preach the gospel, which is the good news or the power of God unto salvation, the good news about a Savior who came to die so that we could have grace, which is unmerited favor, or pardon for sin, which is a transgression of the law. But in order for the church to spread this gospel, it needs a preacher. And in Romans 10 verse 14, Paul asks, how can they hear without a preacher? So without a preacher, the preacher came to spread the gospel through the church which God rose up, the pillar and ground of truth, to spread his gospel, which is the good news about a Savior who came to die so we could have grace, which is pardon for sin, and sin is a transgression of the law. So, as I said before, very often people say, oh, the law is done away with. So if the law is done away with, then it stands to reason that there is no sin, because sin was a transgression of the law. So if there is no sin, then of course there's no need for grace, because grace was pardoned for sin. And if there's no grace, then we really didn't need a Savior, because he came to die so we could have grace. And if there was no Savior, then there's no good news of salvation. And so there would be no gospel. And without the gospel, then of course, why would we really need a church? And without the church, we really would need a preacher. So, what do we have left? Nothing. So, my friends, there you have it. Just as how any nation has laws, even the devil himself has laws by which his subjects are ruled. So why wouldn't God himself, the supreme being, our creator, wouldn't he have a law? So, friends, I hope we have seen by that God's 10 commandments are still binding. Thanks for watching, everyone. And remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Because guess what? The simple things in life are free.